Just I love that voice. Right, so again, welcome to the OGA Training Network Propagation Seminar, led by lovely John from Delfland. Thank you everybody for attending. I'll just hand over to John to crack on with his great presentation, and we'll just go through questions as and when they pop up. There'll be time at the end as well for a bit of a chat, if that's cool. So John, I'll hand over to you.
Yes, hello everyone. I propagate at Delfland Nurseries. We've been propagating for quite a number of years. I moved here when I was 25 and started growing lettuce, tomatoes and cucumbers, and after about 5 years I started propagating. We've been gradually shifting our propagation to organic propagation, and sometimes of the year we're about 60-70% organic, and other times of the year we're 0% organic. So I've got a foot in both camps, and that makes life a little bit more interesting because I can see what's going on at the other side. Right. Propagation is mostly about starting as clean as you can. So we sterilize all our trays, we buy clean compost, and we try and buy clean seed. So the trays are all dipped in. At the moment we use peroxyacetic acid or Jet 5. So if you look at the two tanks, the stacks of pallets on the left hand side of the picture are put into a frame, and then the frame is lowered into the dip tank. The IBC on the right hand side at the top is full of peroxyacetic acid, which is Jet 5 basically, and we've got a system where we can let a certain volume of acid into the tank every time we put a stack of trays into the tank. We can check the strength in the tank with test strips to make sure it's the right strength to kill any pests and diseases. Peroxyacetic acid breaks down to vinegar and water, so it's quite safe, but it is inactivated by organic matter. So if your trays are particularly dirty, then you might have to dip them for a lot longer to be active. We dip ours for about 15 minutes, and we've got 2 dip tanks, so you put them in one and then take it out of the other. It just makes life a bit faster. Right, this is our box washer. You can't really see much, but it's basically the trays flow through it. The boxes flow through it, and it's squirted with hot water and more peroxyacetic acid. As you go further down it, I don't know, can you see my cursor?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, at that point there is a lot of pressure washers, and that blasts the dirt off the trays, and then we collect them up and put them in clamp loads. One of the ADAS officers I always remember from my very early days used to say, if it looks clean, it probably is clean, i.e. you've got all the soil off it, and what is the left, because most of the diseases stay in the soil film on the plastic trays. Next one is that one. Talking about seed, we buy in all of our seed. I'd be a bit worried about if you're saving your own seed, I would make sure it comes from a very clean mother plant. You do not want to be saving seed from diseased plants, because there is a number of seed board diseases which will pass to the next generation. One of them is septoria on celery and celeriac, and that'll stay on the seed coat, infect one or two seedlings, and then the infected seedlings will pass their way through all the crop. They're waterborne and spread with water splash. I've come across fusarium in leeks, and that just tends to rot off the leek seedlings when they were 3/4 grown. There is other ways of stopping it moving about. I'll talk about that later. But it's important to get clean seed, or as clean as you can get it, because organic seed isn't. They test it, and it is below a certain level of disease, but it's never 100% clean. Absolutely 100% clean, but it's 99%, which is good for our, good. Right, seed. This is a pretty awful photograph. I'm sorry I rushed around and took them all, but it's our blocking machine, and it makes blocks, square blocks, and the picture you can see on the right hand side is a box full of blocks with lettuce pellets in them, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. Blocks, right, the machinery to make blocks is either very expensive, or if you buy a cheap blocking machine, then you've got to put a lot of labour into it. So, 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. But it makes blocks. The blocks are, the ones we have are 20% green waste, 80% peat. We'll very shortly be moving to 30% green waste, 70% peat. We are working with Coventry University to try and make a blocking compost which is 100% peat free, but we've only made 5 trays successfully. The biggest problem with the materials we're using are the fact that they are too sticky and stick to every single part of the blocking machine until eventually it doesn't make blocks. The whole thing sort of nearly bungs up. So it's a question of making it sticky enough to stick together and make a block, but not sticky enough to stick to all the parts of the machine. Here, there's a challenge. Right, so the next option is to do them in modules, and that's also a terrible photograph because the light levels aren't very good. But basically, plastic tray with pyramid-shaped holes in it, fill it full of compost, and sow a seed in each one. The compost we use is peat-free. It's It's a mixture of wood fibre, green waste and coir, with various fertilizers added. One of which is soya meal, and then there will be magnesium limestone and various other things. It used to be hoof and horn, but it's not anymore. It's not anymore. What else can I say? It's got to be finely milled so that it fits into the small modules. The other thing to worry about if you're using peat-free compost is that it hasn't quite finished breaking down. So if you buy peat-free compost, it'll start off with a level of nitrogen. I don't know, our modules are about 100 parts per million, and then as it continues to break down, it will work its way down to whatever number, let's say 20 parts per million, and then your seedlings won't grow. So they'll start off growing really well on day one, assuming the compost that you buy is fresh, and eventually, if you keep it for 6 months or longer or shorter, it won't perform the same, so you'll have to feed them.
Can I just check something, John?
Yeah, go
on. Just about peat. Maybe we should. Would you mind saying something about when and why that's being phased out?
Okay. Peat is being phased out. No, they've tried to phase peat out for the last about 20 years, but people keep changing their mind. The peat manufacturers don't want to change because they've set a system up and they've got all their machinery set to harvest peat. Most of the conventional propagators don't want to change because they're wedded to peat and they know how to use it. We did quite a lot of work on peat-free early on, and we're quite happy to use peat-free modular compost, and we wish we could use peat-free blocking compost. The reason we're basically, you're taking peat out of the ground, and when it comes into contact with the air, it breaks down and lets CO2 go. So it's, I'd call it a halfway house between coal and nothing. So it probably takes I don't know, a couple of thousand years to lay the peat down in a peat bog, and then we dig it up and turn it back into CO2.
Yeah, thank you.
Straight away, so you won't catch up. And you could argue the same with wood chip. We use wood chip. You could argue that we burn wood chip and 60, 70 years later it gets used by a tree, which we chop down again and turn it into wood chip. But hey ho. That's how we heat our greenhouses at present. I used to heat them on heavy oil, and I used to burn, I don't know, 30 Arctics of heavy oil in a year, and now I burn 40 to between 40 and 50 Arctic loads of wood chip in a year. Well, that's better than where I was, but
Yeah.
where I'm going next, I don't know.
Where is the wood chip bought in? Is it bought in as pellets or just as chip? Or?
As chip. most of it is, they call it trimmings and thinnings. Basically, when you chop a tree down, you've got the trunk, which is good for planks, wood, or whatever you want to use it for, and then you've got all the branches and bark and stuff like that. They chip that up, and that's what we burn. I suppose you could compost it, but anyway, that's what we burn. Thinnings and trimmings, basically. Moving on, if that satisfies everybody's questions. Right, so that one is right. That is a picture of a lot of brassica plants in modules growing in our greenhouse. What you can see is the floor is covered in plastic, and that is and it's sloping from left to right. Our soil turns into mud really easily, and we've got to get the plants from the back end of that greenhouse to the front. If you think the front, there is a concrete road, so we between carrying and putting them in cages, we get them out of that bay. The plastic on the floor sheds the water down to the right hand side of that bay, which leaves the floor hard, which we can run a tractor or a loader on, so we can get them out of there at a reasonable, without having to walk too far. Because as you can imagine, on the scale we are, we employ quite a lot of labour. Well, there's 25 of us, and we top up in this time of year by about anything from 5 to 10 more people.
I should have asked or said, to start with, John, sorry, the size that you are in terms of acres or hectares under glass, or.
Okay, we've got 7 acres of glass. 1 acre is very good modern glass, with heating pipes and thermal screens and lighting. The one you're looking at now is a very old greenhouse, which I daren't heat because it just goes straight out the cracks in the glass. I'll just, if I go that one, that there is our most modern greenhouse. If you look at them up there, they're high LED lighting. There's also all the heating pipes are in the roof, which is arse about face, because really you want to heat it on the ground and let the heat go up. But if you start putting the heating pipes on the ground, anything that's close to them grows really fast, and anything that's 1 foot, 2 foot away from them grows slower, so you get really uneven plants. So you put all the heating pipes up in the roof so you can move around, and it puts some fans in there, and that sort of distributes the heat quite comfortably. All them boxes there are on a concrete floor, and I use that greenhouse to propagate tomatoes in winter. So we would be doing a lot of conventional rockwool tomatoes in that greenhouse in winter, and we would do a very few organic peat blocked tomatoes for delivery in February, and that's the earliest organic tomatoes we do, although we quite happily do do them at any time. But as you can see, these have gone through the blocking machine and they're covered in vermiculite. So the celery seed we use is pelleted to stop it getting septoria, which is the leaf. It's septoria. It puts black spots on the leaf and sunken spots on the petioles. To stop it, they heat treat the seed, so they have to put it in a bath of water at 40 degrees centigrade, and that kills the septoria. If you go to 41, 42 or 40, oh, I can't remember what number it is, but very close to 40, it kills the seed. So it's a very precise process. When they've done that, they prime it. Who understands priming? Basically, if you've got a seed, a dry seed takes up water, does a lot of chemical processes within the seed, and the next thing it does is put a root out. Now, if it takes a long time to do all them chemical processes in the seed or get rid of the germination inhibitors, that seed will take a long time to germinate. If it hasn't got many inhibitors, or it's not got very, it's done most of its processes internally, it'll take a short time before it puts a root out. So in celery, the difference is 3 weeks between the first seed germinating and the last seed germinating. So what they do is put the seed, they give the seed enough water so that it can do its chemical processes, but not enough water to put a root out. So the seed so what it does is brings all the seed to the same stage of development as up to just before it can put a root out. And luckily enough, at that point, you can dry the seed back again, and all the seed are at the same chemical stage of development, so that when you wet them up again, they all germinate at the same time. Any questions? Because I can't see anybody's faces and I can't tell if you're understanding it or not. So anyway.
Everybody looks very interested.
Okay, right. Oh, we'll carry it. Well, we'll stop. Anyway, it's covered in vermiculite at that point. The vermiculite's there to protect the seed from, in this case, from the sun. So we'll keep them stacked up, or basically in high humidity, until for 5 days, which gives the root chance to come out. Now, if there was nothing over the top of it and we put them out and the sun was shining pretty strongly, all it would do was dry that root out on some of the seeds, the ones that the roots are exposed to the sunshine, and lo and behold, you'd kill half the seeds and the rest would probably germinate, or it kills 10%, or it kills 50%, or it kills 90%. So we put some vermiculite over the top to protect the seed, and immediately it's put down in the greenhouse, we put a little bit of water on it, so the vermiculite's wet. The block is automatically wet, otherwise you can't make blocks with it, and that does that just about guarantees your germination. And then if you're working with blocks, you've got to dry them out. When you've got a germination, you start the process of gradually drying them out, because that makes them, it sets them like bricks. Call it, you're putting a brick in a kiln and it goes really hard. If you start drying a peat block out, it goes hard, and then you can wet it back up again so that it's an okay moisture to plant, but it remains hard-ish. If you block it, put it on the deck and keep watering it a lot, you end up with a mush, and it won't go through planting machines and you can't handle it very well. So yeah, you've got to dry it back a bit and then wet it back up again. Right. These are squashes in modules, and they're on pots to stop them rooting into the ground, the same as all the rest of the modules are. If, for example, I put that module tray on a plastic to stop it rooting into the ground, you would have a mat of root underneath the tray and not very much root in the module. So when you tried to pull it out, you would be tearing all the roots out of the mat underneath the tray. So we lift them up, and as soon as a root decides to stick itself outside the bottom of the tray, the air dries it off. So then it's got to produce another root, and eventually that root, you get a root ball within the module. But the minute you put that on the ground, it will form a mat of root, or it will root into the soil, which is even worse. So you've got to keep it from rooting into the soil. You can see a lot, most of them modules would have been sown on the same day. Yeah, they would have all been sown on the same day. So it just gives you an idea of the difference in speed of germination of varieties of squash, courgettes, might be pumpkins, but it just gives you an idea of the variation. You can mess up the germination of squash by overwatering it or underwatering it, and looking at that, you've got a complicated set of decisions, because some of them are up and you can carry on watering them, and some of them aren't up, and if you water them too much, you'll kill them. Right, they're blocks, and they're covered in sand. The reason we cover them in sand is to, right, we'll go back to square one. If you've got a seed on top of a block, the seed puts a root out. There's two options then. The root goes into the peat, the block, and or the root hits the surface of the block and lifts the seed up, because there's not enough weight on the top for it to push against to push it into the peat. And the way we get over that scenario is we put sand on top of the seed, which is heavy. It's heavier than vermiculite, and then that gives the root chance to push it into the peat blocks. So you've got there things we've got to do that with are onions, leeks, and beetroot, chard. Fennel is a bit difficult as well, but the rest of it, we put vermiculite over the top. You could argue vermiculite is vermiculite is a rock that is put through a kiln, so it's got a lot of embedded energy. So we could do to find alternatives to it. Sawdust would be one, bark would be another, peat would be another, or the module peat would be another. But I haven't got round to sorting that out yet. Leaks. Right, that is a bay in our pretty good greenhouse, and that's full of leaks. So back to heating crops, you can see there the heating pipes there. They're the fans to move the heat around, and they are the LED lights up there. Right, so we've finished that. Right, two strips of leaks. We have they are cut regularly. Right, leeks like to grow, no, don't like to grow, need to grow with nitrogen input. They will grow for about 3 weeks. From seeding, they'll grow for about 3 or 4 weeks quite happily, and then they run out of fertilizer. Depends how much water we put in on, because we tend to overwater a little bit, and then that washes the fertilizer out. But if they run out of fertilizer, and then you put some feed on, they take about 10 days to get going again. So we're well, not instantly, but soon as they're up, we give it once a week. We feed them. It's a concrete floor, and we can run a piece of kit over there with 5 lawnmowers on it to trim them. If you don't trim them, they grow taller and taller till they fall over, and then they are very difficult to plant, and they go the underneath of the bit that's fallen over starts going rotten, and then it turns into a bit of a nightmare. So if you trim the top off them when they're still small, so you're only taking about an inch, half an inch off the top, they stiffen up. They react to being the tops being chopped off, and that stiffens the plant up. So what we're aiming for is something that's about 10 centimeters high, all the same height, so it's easy to plant them. For the customers, they can stick it through a machine. They set their machine up, they know it's coming at 10 centimeters, and they just get on and plant it. But it's a certain amount of wasted space. If you can see the posts, there's a pathway down near the posts. You can't see it, but the wheel will go down there for the lawnmower, and the wheel will go down that middle section, and you push it down one way and you push it back down the other way, and it cuts half of it one way, cuts the strips down one way, and then when you come back it cuts the bit that it's missed. Right. Options for delivery are cages, so racks or whatever, and they are boxes with plants put in them, and we send them on pallet network. We also do very small quantities, which are in smaller trays, and they're posted with a cardboard box. But obviously the cardboard box doesn't come back, and the tray we deliver it in doesn't come back. These plastic trays and cages and plastic trays are all returned, so they get multiple uses. And they do get a lot of uses. They probably get, I might have had them for 30 years and they've done 3 or 4 trips a year. So in terms of recycling, it's pretty good. Well, they've got a pretty good lifespan, and I can recycle them. That particular type of plastic that is made out of is easily recycled. And talking about, yeah,
I was going to say I've seen those trays at a lot of growers' places. I think they
yeah,
recycle them as well. They reuse them
yeah,
for the next
yeah.
delivery.
They can reuse them. I don't mind what they do with them. Talking recycling, I tip about. I have a 40-yard skip at the back of the nursery, which is sent off for landfill recycling or whatever. And I've managed to get it down to 5 tips a year by recycling all the plastic and stuff like that we use. So they want to put my price up now. So
Oh,
I guess. And the same has happened on the borehole as well. I'm using less and less water, and now they want to restrict my water usage, but I'm arguing about that one. So next, we graft tomato plants and cucumbers. We do graft peppers, but I think it's a bit of a waste of time in England. Aubergines as well. Aubergines it isn't, because it increases the yield. Right, if you look at that, and you can't see it, but it's in a grow coon with peat free, and it's got a clip on there where the point where it's grafted. So we will chop the bottom off at 45 degrees, chop the top off at 45 degrees, put them together and put a clip around it to hold it. And then we put them in our grafting room on Danish trolleys wrapped in plastic, which is what this is, and set the temperature at 25 degrees centigrade. What you're looking at is there's also strips of light. So we've got LED lighting in that container bit, and they're the plants there. In the winter we do it in the greenhouse, but in the summer the sun is too strong, and in a nice bright sunny day it will wreck them. So we like to keep them in as controlled temperature as we possibly can, so we don't get any dips in temperature or any increases in temperature. Tomatoes, when they get sort of above 30-35 degrees centigrade, get bacterial soft rots. If you imagine getting an apple and cutting a slight wedge out of it and then sitting it on the side for a week, it will go rotten. And so what you're fighting here is you're cutting a tomato plant bottom and top, and you're hoping that it doesn't go rotten. So you're hoping that the plant knits itself together faster than the bacteria and fungus can get into the cut and rot it. Tomatoes quite easy, surprisingly enough. Cucumbers are extremely difficult. Anyway, cucumbers die at the least possible excuse. Right, next one. Right, if you look at, this is what we're playing with. Right, our tomato plants used to be in big peat blocks. So you can imagine a block. It starts off at 10 centimeters by 10 by 10 centimeters, or 7.5 by 7.5 by 7.5, and it's pressed peat in a hand blocking machine. So what we're trying now is, what you're looking at in the middle is and call it a netted pot. It's made out of cellulose, so organic, and it breaks down, especially when it's wet and warm. So we take that, we put them in them kerry trays, and then we fill it up with peat-free compost. So that's our attempt to get our tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers and aubergines peat-free. And this is the first year that we've done it on a largish scale, and we're waiting for feedback as to where to progress from here. We've probably got a bit to learn yet about how to grow them better, but so far it's not too bad. I'll just, that's the plants, what we've got left in the nursery. We used to have a lot more, but we've delivered quite a lot. So down this section here are cucumbers that have just germinated, and I think they're peppers. So we can either direct seed, which we do, direct seed the cucumbers into the peat-free grow coons and germinate them, because cucumber seeds reasonably easy to germinate, or we graft them and then prick them off into the grow coons, or we can direct sow into the grow coons. So we get a particular dibble bar and make a hole that's sort of 1/2 inch deep or 1 centimeter deep, put a tomato seed in and then cover it over with vermiculite and wait for it to germinate. But pricking off uses less space, but it uses more labour. So it's a bit of a toss up which direction we're going to go in. Right, that's it. So I can go through pests and diseases if you want, or you can ask me a lot of questions and see what you want to.
Thank you very much, John. That was really interesting. Does anyone have any specific questions, or would you like John to talk about any problems? I know a lot of growers rely on Delfland for their transplants, so it's really interesting to hear, and see the pictures as well of exactly where all these plants are coming from. That's really interesting. If anyone's got any questions, do you want to just jump in? Or does anyone use Delfland already? I'm trying to think who I know of who's here. Which one?
That's better.
I had a couple of questions.
Go on.
Thank you.
Hi.
Yeah, I was wondering if you're mixing your own module compost. Are you like mixing in the soya meal and what was it, magnesium limestone?
So yeah, the magnesium limestone controls the pH and adds magnesium as one of the elements. No, we don't. It's too much for us to do, and we leave it to the experts who have got all the machinery to do it. And, for example, we will be buying an Arctic load of blocking compost every week, and the module compost about every 2 or 3 weeks in the season. So, so I'd need virtually another business to keep it happening. So no, we don't. In the early days when I was propagating, some of the propagators made their own compost, and some of them made a mess of it. And because I didn't have any money at the time, I decided I'd buy it in because I hadn't the money to invest in the machinery to do it. So yeah, but you know, these people like Classman have been doing it for so many years. If I was buying organic compost, I'd go to well, I use Classman, but in England I'd go to Melcourt if you can. And if you're buying Melcourt in bags from a distributor, I would just have a good look at the sell-by date on the bag.
Okay.
Because of the it will be reducing in its nitrogen, and you'll stick something in it one day and go, this is not growing very well, and it's mainly because it's run out of fertilizer because it's composting down. So yeah, I'd unless you know what you're doing, I'd stick to buying it in. Depends on what scale you're trying to do it on as well. So but even Coventry University, we were using, one of our trial one of the stuff we were trying to make blocks with was digestate from from these big biodigesters. Round us, we've got a lot of biodigesters that are use maize and sugar beet as their stock, big piles of maize. The nitrogen level in that varied a considerable amount from depends how long it had been stuck in the pile or whatever. I've also sugar beet, they're allowed to put I can't remember, it's chlorpyrrolide or aminopyrrolide on, which is a weed killer for thistles, right? And if that goes through the sugar beet factory, which is heated, they use steam to process it. It will get through to the Kylie vinasse, which is a sticky solution that comes out the bottom as a waste, but it's got a lot of fertilizer in it. It will go into there. If you start feeding tomatoes in pots, about 5 weeks later, they'll all go nettly and die. So what I'm saying is just be careful. The world is not very organic and not very they don't if they can get away with it, they'll get away with it. So right, so fertilizer, I use Nmax from Ilex, and it feeds, the most of it is out of a sugar cane factory. So it's the residual of a sugar cane because of this aminopyrrolide chlorpyrrolide problem. And then they use gram phosphate in it as well. But be careful with with you know, if you go to your compost manufacturer, sorry, you know, you use some compost, be careful where you get it from. I've, yeah,
Yeah, there's been some
found,
haven't there?
I have, yes, there's been some horror stories, yes. Yeah. Anyway.
Did you have another question as well, Rosemary?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was wondering about the sand on the blocks, and I was wondering if you do that on the modules as well.
No, we do vermiculite.
Okay.
We tried perlite on the blocks, especially on the celery. Do you see that big batch of celery? That's on its way to G's, and it dropped the percentage germination by about 2 or 3 or 4%. But you could see it was not as good. The seedlings would fight to get through, so there'd be more uneven. And the same happens when you start putting peat on or bark on, or things just are not quite good enough. And we used to get paid per plant that we sent to G's, so they would turn round and say, well, the germination was 80%, therefore we're only paying you 80%, although they were supplying all the seed. It's anyway, you got a better percentage with vermiculite than you did with perlite. Okay. Going back to sand, our machinery isn't very accurate. It's a bit lumpy, this sand, and it's not sharp sand. It's the sort of sand they put in sand pits for kids, and I think on its pure form, it goes for glass making. So it's not builder's sand. It's
really powdery, that place.
Yeah, yeah, it's really powdery and very clean. Builder's sand, Jill tells me, sometimes is very alkaline. Depends where it's come from. But you could try it and see what happens. I don't think, I was just told that, no, I found out that this was good sand to use and carry on using it. And at the scale I'm working at, you don't want to be trying a wagon load of something that doesn't work, because that's expensive. The organic growers tend to be a little bit more forgiving than some of the conventional growers. Let's put it that way. I have been sued before.
Yeah.
Not by an organic grower. Many times, not just once either.
That reminds me of a question I can ask if anyone. I'm interested in how it all works. Like, do you grow to contracts? Do you sell, sort of let people know, well, I've got this many if you want some? How does the pre-order, how far in advance do they pre-order?
Right, we do, right, in our conventional system, we do all to pre-order. You know, if we're doing trays, which is the cardboard boxes, we open our website up and put that something like you've got 100 available, so you might decide you want 10 of them or something like that. But on the day we sow them, we sow all the orders and then sow probably 2 or 3 or 4 more, so then that 100 will drop straight away down to 3. So there'll be a few we grow on spec, but not many. We used to grow a lot on spec, but the world changed. Where we are, there used to be a lot of very small growers who would probably fill their back garden full of cabbages or cauliflowers or whatever they fancied growing, and they could market them at Wisbeach Market, because they could take, 20-30 boxes of cauliflowers and they'd get a price for them. So it was a way of earning a bit of spare cash. But that, when the supermarkets took over, it all crashed, because people stopped. A lot of the greengrocers stopped being greengrocers, and everybody bought their stuff off the supermarkets, and it just collapsed. And we would grow spare plants for these backdoor gardeners, and it just didn't happen anymore. And anyway, if putting my business hat on, if I'm growing spare plants, I need more money for them, because I know I'm going to throw a few away. Whereas all the growers who were buying spare plants would come along and say, these are spare plants, we'll give you half for them. So my incentive to grow anything spare disappeared within 2 or 3 years. The only reason I would grow spare plants is if it was a difficult, right, if it's a difficult batch and I know might be in trouble, I do grow spare. If I'm glasshouse plants, I will grow spare plants, glasshouse, for tomatoes. So you could always get a few aubergines off me, a few tomatoes off me within the season, because if you're a big commercial tomato grower, the last thing you want is, when you're heating a greenhouse, is to have 10% of it empty because the propagator hasn't got enough plants, because they haven't done very well. So we overdo that one by about 5%. And if we've got problems coming down the line, we have to be really quick and put some more in. And our schedules in there are pretty loose, so that, let's say I'm saying to the growers, I can get your tomato plant out in 8 weeks. I know I can do it in 7 or 6 if I really put them in the warmest place with the most light and so I can tell them there's a problem and say I'll have it fixed in a week. But the most important thing is that you've got good staff who can identify anything going wrong quickly, and especially if it's their fault, they're likely to hide it. And that is really, that's a double whammy. They've made a mistake and they've hidden it. And you have to encourage people to put their hand up as quick as possible. So you have not to get angry. Just do not get angry. So and then you pick the problem up quickly, you do something about it. Everybody knows that plants have problems, and as long as you're solving it quickly, it's usually not a problem in the end. It's when you're trying to hide your problems, then they become difficult.
A good lesson for life there.
Yeah, it is.
How far in advance do people pre-order? Is it pretty close to when you might sow, or?
Sometimes cucumber replants, yes, but most of my growers tend to put an order in January, February for half the year, because what you plant in July, it's probably going to go over winter, and it's probably being harvested in January, February, March, April, perhaps even May. So they won't have even seen if the variety is any good, or how many they could sell, or so they'll take another bite of the cherry in about this time of year. So they order it in 2 batches, which is good as long as they don't forget. Yeah, but you've got to see, you know, the Calabrese market's just dropped out, you know, somebody else has moved in and got all the Calabrese, so I don't want to sow any next year. You know, or this variety, you haven't got a better one than this one, have you? And there's always new varieties coming out. And yeah, I'll get on my high horse about Victorian varieties if you want. There is some very good old varieties, but if the Victorians came along now and picked up one of the varieties that we have now and go, oh, this is resistant to this virus, and this disease, they'd stick it in and they'd just scrap their old one.
Yeah.
It's just, sorry, you know.
That's perfectly legitimate, a high horse. So.
Yeah.
But
I've grown some of the old varieties, and things like bull tardy beetroot is really good because it seemed to have found one with plenty of resistances in it. But you know, some of the old heritage tomatoes, you'd put them in a box and they'd split. You know what I mean? And you know, they're for growing in your garden and they taste absolutely wonderful. But if they're split and putting juice out when you put them in your box, you just no, you can't get away with it. Oh, sorry.
No, not at all. I realised I've monopolised lots of questions. Does anyone else have any questions? I know John's covered a lot, so hopefully he's already answered any questions you had. But Nina, have you got one?
Hearing myself. Yeah, I had a couple of questions, if that's okay. For John.
Yeah.
First, thank you so much for the talk. It's been really interesting. My first question was about weeds. Do you have a problem with weeds, and what do you do about it specifically in the organic?
Right. We get weeds. We cover about 60% of our greenhouses are covered in concrete. Okay, don't go there. And the other greenhouses are covered with plastic on the floor. We get weeds growing at the ends and between the gutters and down there. And the concrete ones, we have a flame weeder, which we control it with a flame weeder. And the plastic, we've just got to pull it out. But you don't get much because you wrap it tight around the posts and things like that, and put it up against the edges. So we're quite lucky. You're in a field situation, and weeds are your biggest problem. But I have a grower who grows tender stem, who doesn't hand weed his crop. He's got some pretty sophisticated weeding system, you know, weed hose. They cost money, but he can get away without doing any hand weeding on his tender stem, and he grows squashes. I have seen pumpkins grown on a diamond scale, so they precision sowed them so that the weeder can go that way, and that way. Can you see that? Sorry, did you see that? So right, so that you can But if you lined it up so your rows were like that, and the gaps were always, if you did it on a grid, you could hoe that way with machinery, and hoe that way with machinery, and hope there's not much left to compete with the plant. And there is some quite clever, it's easy hoeing that way down, and then there is machinery now which is on, let's call it, it does this, it just goes round and round, and it can time it so it goes, if there's plants here, it'll go through there, and the next plant's there, and it will go around there and round there, if that makes sense to you. It's on a,
I suppose I want
this.
to like more in the like when if you do like blocking stuff.
Yeah.
Like in that, like if you have, because we do like prop here where I am, and we have like module trays, and they do get like quite a lot of weeds germinating in the trays.
Right.
Like how, and we just hand weed.
I have to hand weed them if that happens. Some of the weeds come in the compost. Some of them fly in from outside. You know, your fluffy ones like groundsel and sow thistle, and you know, and willow herb. Willow herb's awful. And we have to pull them out. And some of them, when the trays are thrown on the headlands and it's covered in weeds, the weed seeds stick to the trays, and the sterilant doesn't kill them, because it just doesn't. And then when you fill them up with compost, there'll be 3 or 4 weeds growing around the outside of your module, and sorry, but you got to pull them out by hand at that point. We don't get so many problems with the brassicas because they tend to smother the weeds, but we do get problems in leeks, and we regularly, once a crop, we'll go send somebody down pulling all the weeds out when they're about, I don't know, 2/3 grown. See, I haven't found an answer to that yet, apart from pulling them out. So, no.
My other question, maybe a stupid question, why do you graft your tomatoes and cucumbers rather than
okay,
like plant them from seed?
They've got, the tomato breeders have some really good material that is resistant to lots of soil-borne diseases. And they've got some good material that produces really nice tasty fruit. And I think they gave up on trying to put them all into one package, i.e. one plant, and decided to breed the rootstock separate to the top. So if you're breeding for, I don't know, 100 characteristics, it's very difficult to get the genes for 100 characteristics into the same seed. So I think they gave in on it and concentrated on the 50 for the root diseases and 50 for the nice tasting tomatoes. And then you just graft them together. Cucumber rootstocks stand the cold a bit better and live for a bit longer. Pepper rootstocks are usually resistant to nematodes, amongst other things, but that's a Dutch problem because the water table is so high in Holland that the nematodes can float around. Big flat area, lots of water, nematodes float around, and nearly every single pepper crop gets nematodes, whereas in England we're a bit higher up and it doesn't ever seem to be a problem. And the growers, the commercial growers that I've talked to, after 11 months growing a pepper crop, they might see 2 or 3% difference. If you're organic and you're growing it in a tunnel, I don't think you'll see very much difference, even if you grow your plant for 8 months of the year. The other thing about tomato, they've managed the root. If you've got a grafted rootstock, if you can grow tomatoes in the same place without getting disease problems 10 years. Whereas if you grow a normal tomato, the first year you'd get a really good yield, the second year you would get a pretty good yield, the third year, look out, you might see a 50% reduction in your yield. And it carries on getting worse until it plateaus somewhere badly. And the other good thing about grafting is the rootstock is pretty vigorous, and you can take 2 shoots from a plant. So instead of putting 1 seed, 1 plant, 1 growing, you can take 1 seed, 1 plant, stop it, take 2 shoots off it, and grow the 2 shoots as 2 separate plants. So you're getting two plants for the price of 1, basically. You could, if you're a cherry grower, you could do 4 if you want, but not on if you were growing beef tomatoes, you're probably better off sticking to 2 shoots, not 4. But aubergines tend to increase the yields and increase the disease resistance to botrytis. No idea why. No idea why. Just it increases the yield by 10%, but you can't. If you were taking 2 shoots off an aubergine because of the rootstock, you can't do it in propagation because it fails at about a 40% level. We've never managed to get it to work to above 90%. We've always 60, 70%. And then you say into the grower, I'm sorry, I can't get 2 shoots. You have to have all these plants with 1 shoot. But that's not what I asked for. And then there's a discussion after that. So, okay. I can do disease resistance if you want. Sorry, not. We never mentioned predators and parasites and things like that. So.
Yeah. Does anyone have a burning? We've got a few minutes left. Does anybody have a burning question, or we can talk about predators and parasites? Is everyone happy? Go for it, John.
Tactically, I'm exporting all my problems. Right? Basically, I grow a plant for, let's say, 5 weeks, and then I shift it, send it out the door for you lot to sort out. No, that's bad. But yes, I'm exporting all my problems because I might have a low level of whitefly on brassicas or tomatoes, and it might only be 1 or 2 plants with a whitefly on it, but that's your problem when I've delivered it. So what we do is let a low level of parasites go on a continuous basis, with the hope that if anything's in the greenhouse, there's always something there hunting it. So we're letting Incasia go, a lot of aphid parasites. We use Werski mite on cucumbers, but we've got to spread that on the cucumbers when they're block thick, and they're because when we space them out in the greenhouse, it's very difficult to spread this stuff around and get it on every single plant, but it's okay when they're small in the seedling stage, you can spread it on. What else we do? Hypoaspis for scarrid fly. Yeah, we stick in anything we can to stop it. The Swirsky is for thrips, because quite often, especially about from now onwards, the thrip population starts coming in through the greenhouse roof. Aphids do. One of our biggest problems was scarrid fly. The scarrid fly lay their eggs on the organic compost, because the organic compost has got rotting green waste in it, and they're really attracted to the green waste. So we've got something called lalgard, which is a metarrhizal fungus that does a pretty good job of killing them. So we use dipel, which is Bacillus thuringiensis or whatever it is, for caterpillar, and that's pretty damn good. We use pre-stop or T34 for fungus, for fusarium on leeks. That works. Pre-stop, pretty good, works for damping off diseases, but I'd like to think they're introduced via the seed rather than because we dip all our trays. When I used to be conventionally propagating, I would be spraying regularly for Rhizoctonia. When I started doing organic plants, the only option was to make sure it was clean enough so that I didn't get the problem. And I would think 4 years after I went organic, I stopped getting Rhizoctonia problems, because I'd eventually eliminated it out of my system. But and then there's Rhizoctonia, there is Foma, which they call blackleg as well, and that's seed-borne, because I got a batch of seed from a grower, gave me a batch of seed from America, and they're not bothered about Foma because they spray for it. So this is a conventional, right? My conventional plants are grown organically until the point of delivery, when I have to treat them for cabbage root fly, which will be either tracer or varimark. So they're at one side of the nursery and the organic plants are at the other side. But I don't spray them very much, or don't spray them with anything nasty. And this batch of seed had Foma in it, and it spread, and literally I walked around the grower's crop, and out of 100 plants, I doubt there was 2 still alive. So hence, make sure your seed is clean.
That's a very nice kind of bringing back to the start.
Yeah.
We should probably wrap up now, because we're out of time. But I just want to say again, thank you very much for giving up your time. That was really, really interesting. I'm sure everyone else found that really interesting as well. I'm sure, you know, we're not going to have all our propagating spaces looking quite like Delfland, but
Well, just keep them clean; they'll be fine.
yeah, keep it clean
Yeah.
is a good motto.
Mm, it is.
But yes, thank you very much for that, and
Okay.
we will hopefully catch up soon. And thank you everyone for coming. I'll put this recording out to those who couldn't make it, and we'll
Okay.
arrange our next farm visits soon. So yeah,
Okay.
thank you very much, everybody, and
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you.